right, welcome Gator Nation. We're fortunate to have with us today Simon Brandon-Lai, who's the Director of Research at Turnkey Sports Entertainment in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks very much for having me.
All right, so let's start a little bit with your career path. I know you've had a couple twists and turns in there, so can we start, I guess, when you got your master's degree in sport management from Temple and take us through your role today?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I started the master's program at Temple University. It was a master's in sport and recreation management. I believe it's now transitioned into a sport business master's. But yeah, we were in with rec folks, tourism folks as well, but with some sport-specific classes. And I think it was a fantastic experience for me, primarily because it was my first real introduction to doing research in the sport industry. I was fortunate enough to be offered a research assistantship. They have a centre there called the Sport Industry Research Centre that's run by Jeremy Jordan and Dan Funk. And being in there working on projects really gave me some hands-on experience, and that was really what sort of took me in my research career trajectory, if you like. So yeah, we were working with a lot of mass participation sport events, the Broad Street Run, some marathons across the country, and it was just fantastic. Just sort of thrown in at the deep end, data analysis, reporting, and trying to make it happen. So that was a fantastic experience, and so I was there for the 2 years of my masters, and then decided, as the rest of my cohort was saying, well, can't wait to get out of education, and we're done with getting degrees and things like that. And I was thinking, I feel like I'm just getting started, and I was really, getting into reading the research and familiarizing myself with the different things that were going on in the field. And so I thought, well, why not pursue a PhD? And so Dan Funk was an Ohio State grad, and he put me in touch with Dr. Jeff James at Florida State, and he became my advisor for my PhD. And so I was down there in Tallahassee, sunny Tallahassee, rival Tallahassee, I suppose, for 3 years doing my PhD, working under Jeff James, and actually with some folks in the business school as well. Dr. Joe Ferris was a big influence on my dissertation research on corporate reputation in the sport industry and some scale development in there. So that was my sort of my academic training, and then I took a position teaching at SUNY Cortland, part of the State University of New York system. So we moved from the boiling Florida heat to the frozen tundra of upstate New York.
Yes, you did.
And yeah, so I was teaching there for a year before my wife was presented with an opportunity back in Philadelphia, where she's originally from, and so we moved down there, and I got in touch with Turnkey through some mutual contacts that I had, folks that I'd met along the way who had previously worked there, and spoke to them about this job opening for the Director of Research position, and then that sort of brings me to where I am today.
Fantastic. I think a lot of our students and viewers would be familiar with Turnkey Sports Entertainment because they might see a poll in Sport Business Journal or something to that effect, but I'm not sure that anybody really has a sense of the scope of their activities. So could you just share a little bit of background about Turnkey, their history, and sort of their major functions today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe Turnkey's been around since about 1996, founded by owner and CEO Len Perner, who's a very well-connected guy in the industry. And Turnkey, I mean, as you say, we have a pretty good presence, particularly in Sport Business Journal. We have a great relationship with the SBJ folks, and we give them some of our research, sponsorship benchmarks and things like that. And it's of interest to their readership. But yeah, so we have a pretty good presence in the marketplace. And what Turnkey Sport and Entertainment does, it has two functions really. So it's split into Turnkey Search and Turnkey Intelligence. And so Turnkey Search is executive search, so recruiting for AD positions, head coaching positions. We've done some GM searches in the NBA quite recently, the Atlanta Hawks. I think we placed their GM.
That's very cool.
And so that's the search side, and that's not, I see those folks every day, and they do a fantastic job, but that's not actually the side that I'm involved in. I'm on the sort of research and analytics side, Turnkey Intelligence. And so Turnkey Intelligence has, I believe, over 200 clients that we work with across the sport and entertainment space as well, not just sports teams and leagues, but we have some music festivals and CVBs that we work with as well.
Okay.
And we do a bunch of different things, really, anything from brand health tracking to we do a huge project with the NFL actually with their game day experience.
Okay.
So everyone who attends an NFL game each week gets a survey from Turnkey, provided we have their data, we get that, the contact information we get from the NFL, and we ask them questions about their game day experience, anything from concessions to parking, arrival, departure, the performance of the team and how they feel that's going, are they headed in the right direction. So we run that all year, all season long, provide those insights to the league office, and they disseminate to the teams, and we report directly to the teams as well, and give them some pretty good insights. So I'd say that's probably our biggest project.
Okay.
I oversee a similar project with the NBA, or a similar size project, I suppose, probably the second biggest one with the NBA, with their corporate sponsors, so tracking the sponsorship effectiveness over the course of the season. Are their activations hitting home? Are people, becoming more aware of the brand, recognizing the brand more? Things like that. But yeah, so we do a lot of that. We also do a lot of sponsorship valuation as well. So either helping teams to decide, well, what is this sponsorship package worth, or on the brand side, are we getting our money's worth from the sponsorship package? And so that could be anything from a landmark partnership all the way up to naming rights. One of the big projects we're working on at the moment is the naming rights deal for a National Hockey League franchise. And so helping them to determine, we have this arena that's coming up, we want to make it the Brand X arena. What is that package worth to a brand? Because they want to make sure that they're not undercharging based on the sponsorship assets they have available. And that's one of my favorite parts of the job is dealing with those folks, dealing with the clients, and helping them figure out what everything's worth.
That's awesome, and I feel like a lot of our students and viewers may not even know that organizations like yours sort of exist in this space and are sort of operating behind the scenes. So as a director of research, and I guess you've touched a little bit how your team is working really in that NBA space and the sponsor relationships, what is your role specifically within that machine that you just described?
Right, so I mean, there's a lot of project management involved. And I guess at the start, we're dealing directly with the teams, helping to figure out what their strategy is. So what are the big picture things they're looking to get out of these sponsorships? They funnel a lot of money in, but what are they looking for? Are they looking to improve community relations? Are they looking just to increase brand recognition? Or are they looking to measure a particular activation that they're doing, maybe a promotion or a giveaway at a game? Is that moving the needle with season ticket holders, other fans and things like that? So we need to have a really clear idea of what they're trying to get out of it, so that we can design research that really gets to the heart of that. So on the front end, there's a lot of that, and we meet constantly with them over the course of the early portion of the project to make sure we have everything just so. And then what happens? We start crafting the surveys, and then we go through a series of pretty rigorous tests and checks to make sure that when we send something out to their entire season ticket holder list, it doesn't have the wrong team's name in, for example, and it doesn't have the wrong sponsor perceptions that they're trying to measure, something like that. So there's a lot of management like that on the front end, and then we roll it out. We get the results back. And then it sort of shifts to the data analysis part. So we work with our data analytics team to see, well, we have all this data, and we have a lot of data from these, a lot of data points from each of the sponsors. But which of the variables is driving other variables, things like that? Say you have brand awareness. Well, which of the promotions was driving brand awareness more than the others? Which of the, with the NFL project, for example, which of these game day experience elements, concessions, team performance, arrival, departure, which of them is actually moving the needle on people's overall experience? And so that really helps when we get into the reporting phase. We try to create a story. So, we give them all of the information somewhere, giant appendix sections happen, but what we try and do is we try and synthesize the insights for them. So we say, well, we came across this really interesting thing with one of your sponsors, something that perhaps we didn't expect to see, or just maybe it's something that is expected, but we really want to double down and make sure that they're focusing on this because it really has jumped out off the page at us as we're sort of reviewing
Sure.
the information. And so crafting that story that they then can take to their sponsor and say, this is working, or perhaps this isn't working as well as we anticipated, but we have an ongoing relationship. How can we, as we move into year 2, perhaps of the sponsorship, do some things a little bit differently, activate in a different way to try and produce the effect that you are looking for. So
I love that. And I'm not even going to begin to try to ask you what a typical day looks like, because I'm guessing there is no typical day in your life.
Well, I mean, there isn't a typical day necessarily, but it's a lot of meetings.
Okay.
And a lot of, given the nature of our work, I mean, we don't have to meet face to face very often.
Sure,
but
sure.
We get very comfortable using Skype for business, okay. And those kinds of programs, GoToMeeting and things like that. We do a lot of phone calls with with clients to keep in touch, because really a lot of the time we're working with the teams, but they're also working with the brands to make sure that they're on the same page. And so constant communication really helps us to stay on the same page and make sure we're moving in the right direction. So a lot of meetings, both internally and externally, and somewhere along the way trying to actually do the work that we need to do to get these things out.
No, I understand that. So I'm curious, going off script here a little bit. We know you got your PhD from the university that must not be named, and but you were trained as an academic researcher, and you operated in that field for a little while before sort of transitioning to industry and applying those skills to industry. Can you give us a sense of how research in the industry differs or is similar to research sort of in an academic environment?
Right, absolutely. I think the nice thing was moving from academia to industry with Turnkey was that they understood what it was I could do.
Okay.
And it wasn't so much about what I had done, because there are differences between academic research and market research and analytics, things like that. But it was less about what I'd done. They understood what I'd done, but it was what I could do. What were the transferable skills? So in terms of data literacy, data analytics, or data analysis rather, and also, I mean, we do a lot of presenting as academics, be it at conferences or getting in front of a class full of students, every day of the week and talking to them about sport management. So that translates quite well to the client side. So it was really nice as I was sort of on the job market and I was applying to different industries, not just focused on the sport industry. Sure. And Turnkey was probably the one company where they understood. They weren't looking and going, well, we don't really know what academics do. You're a teacher, right? And that was sort of the end of it, But really appreciating, well, these are the skills that we already have in-house, and we can enhance and maybe bring some fresh insights into what we do. And so I've sort of forgotten the question.
No, you answered the question actually.
Okay,
That was perfect. Okay. That was awesome. I threw that was a curveball at you. I
No,
that wasn't on
that's
the
fine,
list.
that's fine.
I just was thinking about that as you were talking. All right, so you talked about one side of the house at Turnkey Sports Entertainment, really focused on business intelligence. And I think what we sort of mean when we say business intelligence is this word analytics. And I think analytics is comprehended in a variety of different ways. I'm curious what that term analytics means to you.
Yeah, so the term analytics to me is kind of funny, because I really see it as a rebrand of data science.
Okay.
Data science sounds very, very boring.
Yes, it does.
And it's hard to make that sound sexy, but I think this analytics movement sounds sexy. It sounds like something that people want to get into. It sounds interesting. When we think of analytics, we think of Billy Bean, we think of Moneyball, we think of those kinds of things that we're interested in, that sound compelling. And so really, that's where I see it. It's taking data and making decisions based on that data. And we were talking a little bit before we got started, and you're saying it can range from something very, very simple to some very, very complex modelling. Sure. And the nice part about analytics being an all-encompassing term is it really captures that, because some of the things that we do don't require really, really complex modelling, and other things do. But it's nice that all of that is sort of encapsulated within analytics, and I think it is good for the industry really, because it makes it more approachable. Yeah, I agree. And certainly, as a lot of organisations now, particularly in the sport industry, it took a while to catch up to the rest of corporate America really, in terms of evidence-based decision making, having to put data behind behind the things that you're doing. So now as the sports industry starts to catch up, not just on the team side with the Moneyball and performance analytics, but also with sponsorship insights and like I say, the valuation stuff we do as well. There has to be accountability, before these decisions are made. And so I think as the industry trends toward that kind of decision making, and the folks in the industry, some of them are so advanced. You're talking about people with MBAs from Ivy League schools.
Sure.
You can't pull the wool over their eyes.
Yeah,
You can't just give them basic analysis when it's something more complex is required.
Sure.
And so it really challenges us to raise our level and make sure that we're producing insights based on the correct techniques, not just the techniques that we know. So there's constant learning, constant reinvigoration of the work that we do, and it's I think it's fantastic, and I think the sort of the rebranding of data science as analytics has had a real a tangible effect on that.
I love that. I like that concept, or that imagery of sort of that rebranding, and so that's all great, and I love that, and I'm nodding along and agreeing with you. I think a lot of our students and younger professionals would have a hard time really applying that, or thinking of a very specific example of how that actually applies in the industry. So I'm curious if you could share an example of how you took some data and then you were able to give a recommendation about how a decision was made. Do you have a practical example you could share?
Right, absolutely. I mean, we were actually doing some ad copy testing for an NBA team. And by ad copy testing, I mean, they had two distinct pieces of creative, with one with an NBA player and a little button that says buy tickets here. And then the other one was a more graphic design, sort of the arena and some kids playing basketball, and then a similar button to buy tickets here. And so what they wanted to know is, well, which should we roll out with our advertising campaign? Because they had a slogan sort of about rebuilding. They're sort of anticipating, I think, maybe a rough stretch where they're trying to acquire some draft picks and rebuild, if you like.
Yes.
So they wanted to know which of these resonates more with our fans. And not only which resonates more, but which really gets at the message that we're trying to get to, this sort of idea of rebuilding. And so we put these two pieces of creative side by side and engaged some panel respondents from that market that they're in, and asked them all kinds of questions about how these pieces of creative made them feel. And then we were able to take their responses. Was it things like, did it make them happy? Did it make them more likely to buy tickets in the end? Did it make them think badly of the team? But I mean, much more sort of insightful things than I can necessarily remember off the top of my head. But what we did was we took all those data points and like I said before, we sort of said, well, which are the things that are driving this? And are the things that are driving overall perceptions actually getting to the overall perceptions that the team wants?
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, it's not all about just does this make you like the team more, but really, does this produce the effect that we're looking for in the overall strategy?
Sure. Does it align with what they want?
Yeah, if our strategy is to get people on board with the rebuild, does this achieve that? And so when we looked at these two pieces of creative side by side, we saw that one of them was actually far more effective than the other, and so we were able to make that recommendation. And they said, "Fantastic, okay." It was not what they were expecting to hear, but they were comfortable with our methodology, and so we were able to show them what the people that they were trying to reach thought about the two, and they proceeded with the one that was more successful.
And it has been successful.
We are still in that period where we're going to re-engage with them, but
Gotcha.
I'm not sure that anything would get people to go watch that particular NBA team right now. But hopefully, as I say, in the long term, it will sort of insulate their brand perhaps from some of the negative consequences of extended losing, and help keep things optimistic for them.
Sure. So you've talked a little bit about how the sport and entertainment industry is a little behind corporate America, right, with using sort of evidence and data-driven decisions. And then you talked about sort of the variety of things that you all work on, from naming right valuations to sponsor activations. Where do you see that research and analytics and data science really having the biggest impact right now in sport and entertainment?
I think certainly in terms of what I do, I think the biggest challenge that we're faced with on the valuation side is a lot of that value is generated by people who see be it a sign, be it scoreboard branding, be it an activation that happens on court, is really trying to estimate how many people are actually seeing this. And part of that gets to TV viewership. An enormous part of it is TV viewership. And so a lot of the value of these in-arena assets, and even some out of arena that get captured on TV, is how do we estimate the TV audience? And so historically, it's been easy. You know,
Sure.
we've used Nielsen data based on, you know, people have the box on top of their TV or they fill out the survey and they get the $2 or $5 or whatever
I got
it is.
30 last time I did it.
Oh, fantastic. They're obviously giving more in Gainesville than they were in Tallahassee anyway. But yeah, and that's been fine. You know, everyone's relied on that and it's become an industry standard. But obviously now we see far more fragmented, you know, media really. So there aren't just people watching the NBA on their cable package. There's also people who subscribe to NBA League Pass. There are people, you know, watching via a number of different mediums, and not just watching the games, but also engaging on social media and things like that. And it's how do we capture that level of engagement? Because at the moment, and there's a, you know, I'm sure Nielsen are working on it, I'm sure there are a bunch of different folks working on it, a solution where we can really capture where these brands are being picked up. And so something that has an application in the sport industry, but it's across all media really. You know, when how do we get accurate data about people watching, you know, watching Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and things like that. And so all of this data exists somewhere, all of this is being tracked, but it's how do we aggregate it in a usable form, and then how do we go about picking up or, you know, recording which brands are being picked up at which times, because, you know, if you're trying to sell a brand on a sponsorship, you want to be able to give them a bit of a picture of exactly where they're going to appear. You know, you want to make sure it aligns with their strategy, and you also want to make sure that you're doing the package justice. You know, you will appear on, you know, to this many people, and you don't want to underestimate it. And on the flip side, the brands don't want to feel like anything's being overestimated. So there has to be confidence in these solutions. And so I think that's sort of the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges that we're faced with, is how do we capture some of that incremental value, not just from in-person attendees, not just people watching on TV that gets picked up by the Nielsen ratings, but also all of these other channels. Because, you know, I mean, all of these teams have digital media departments and folks that are working on brand activation on social media all day long. That's their whole job. And we're a little behind as an industry, I think, in providing solutions to capture all of that. And so that's one of the biggest things we're working on at Turnkey. And you know, I feel like we're getting toward a solution. Hopefully, get out ahead of you know, ahead of some other folks. But you know, everyone's playing the same game at the moment, trying to get there.
I've heard similar sentiment with a number of different people within our industry, is that we have a lot of data. We're not quite sure what to do with it all yet, and we're still sort of working through that. So I'm going to ask you to be a little bit of a futurist here. I know on the performance side, we have the technology is really about capturing every single movement a player makes, either through in-arena cameras or court sensors or whatever it is. I'm curious, sort of from the business side of the house, projecting forward 5, 10, 15 years, where do you see sort of that next major application of data science or data collection or analytics to drive decisions?
I mean, I think it might end up going back to my previous answer, because I think as media becomes more fragmented, we have to keep up with it. You know, we know that it's fragmented, and we know that currently we need to pick up, you know, these different video on demand sources and things like that. But it's how do we get to the broader media landscape? Like how do we capture everything, not just brands showing up and logo recognition, but also when brands are mentioned, when brands are talked about, is it a positive sentiment, is it a negative sentiment? We see with the NFL at the moment, and you know, the anthem protests and some of the corporate sponsors coming out and speaking against that and the impact it's having on their business, and seeing, well, not only what does that discussion produce in terms of positive and negative effect for them, but when they come out and criticize, you know, anthem protests, or the NFL's dealing with the anthem protests within the context of corporate sponsorship, that's not everyone's, you know, not everyone finds that an appropriate sort of medium for discussion either. So then what effect does that have? Because we really need to produce a holistic picture of how brands are being received within the overall media landscape. And so as, you know, as more social media channels open up, as we move away, you know, people cutting the cord is going to be a huge challenge, because that'll start to chip away even more at the relevance of that Nielsen data, and really require us to step up and come up with things that are not only capture what's going on, but continue to be flexible and continue to anticipate what the next development's going to be. Because who knows? You know, I'm sure there's folks in Silicon Valley cooking up something that's going to make our jobs even harder in you know, 10, 15 years, or probably sooner than that even, that we're going to have to respond to. So, and data comes out of all of this. Data is captured in every single thing that happens, and if we're going to advise our clients the best we can, we need to be on top of it.
So there's a good transition there as we think about our young professionals out there, and if this is a space they're sort of interested in, as we talk about 5, 10, 15 years, sort of the direction of being able to handle that mass quantity of data and try to figure out how to continue to collect relevant data, but then how to work with that data. Are there specific types of experiences you would recommend maybe a student that is thinking about this space pursue at this point or early in their career to be prepared to take on or to be a member of, let's say, your team in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think while you're at school, obviously there's internship experiences and everyone's pursuing those.
Sure.
But obviously it's hard. You're trying to get a lot of the time whatever you can. But I think, again, in my experience, even after my PhD program, was trying to show people what I could do. Okay. What are the skills that I have that people need? Okay. And now, given the trend in the industry, data literacy and data analysis capabilities are vital. We were interviewing for an office manager position, somebody who was really answering our phones, distributing our mail, things like that. And one of the things that we were looking for in our applicants was the ability to at least be data literate at a fairly high level, and hopefully somebody who could be involved in data analysis.
Wow.
Because as we have people just calling into the office and they're describing, what it is that who they're trying to talk to, but what the issue is they're having or what they're trying to convey, that person needs to at least have an idea so that they're not just sort of shoveling the call along. And so I think while people are in school, and particularly, like a fantastic university like UF, where you have so many classes at your disposal in different schools, different departments, and it won't be a popular thing probably, but take some classes in statistics, not just the basic ones that are required, because I remember those ones that I took. Sure. And it's not that they were bad classes, but I wasn't using the skills that I was learning. Sure. So continue to take those classes, keep your eye in basically, just keep using, get involved in your research methods classes, see if you can collect data, seek out classes where there are projects where you do data collection and data analysis, and really hone your skills, because that's a very compelling story to an employer. If I'm interviewing somebody and they have a track record of producing data analysis and reporting and things from their classwork, to me that's somebody who's gone out and tried to improve themselves. It shows not only aptitude, because everything needs to be refined, there'll be different processes wherever you go, but an aptitude for learning and a willingness to learn, and an excitement for learning about analysis. And I think a lot of the time it seems, my first thought about statistics was, it took me back to, my math classes in high school, and it wasn't, it's not a pleasant memory for me. Sure. But really it's less about math, and it's less about statistics, and it is understanding research design. And once you start to understand research design and where all the parts of the research process fit together, really the statistics aren't too bad. There are fantastic programs. I remember the first time I used SPSS, I was very intimidated by it, but it's actually quite a user-friendly tool. Like I say, I was someone who hated my high school math classes. I didn't do very well in them, but these programs are designed to make it easy for you. So if you have the intellectual capacity and the willingness to sit down and just do it. It's probably not going to be the most fun time you spend in your life, but what it enables you to do is to do this data analysis and get to the stuff that is interesting. The processes themselves aren't interesting, but the insights that you get from them really are. And that's how Jonah Hill's character in Moneyball really got to the crux of it. He wasn't interested in the models he was running necessarily. It was the data that was being produced that was just revolutionary in the way that the baseball industry is viewing player performance. Sure. And that's the really compelling part. So, it's kind of eat your vegetables, really. Like if you can, if you can get through that and really become, not a huge expert in data analysis, but at least you understand data. If somebody shows you a research paper, you can understand what was done, and then even better if you can go out and do it yourself. Then that's really compelling, because it's a show me what you can do kind of moment, not just what I hope to be able to do. And certainly for a company like Turnkey, it helps us, when we have interns come in and when we have, our managers come in and they can do these things, they can hit the ground running, and we can give them more responsibility, get them interacting with clients, and we can get them moving up in the company. So it's that would be my one piece of advice.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks
Absolute
very
pleasure. Great insights today, and go Gators.